It's interesting, Pete, because, the Prime Minister can try and emulate Bob Hawke all he wants. I think you asked him that question this morning if he was taking a leaf out of a page out of Bob's playbook. But, Bob spent years leading up to the Accord and the work and the relationships that he built with both unions and business. So my question really is this another, marketing ploy by Scotty from marketing, or is it really genuine? Because if it is genuine, there's going to have to be some serious commitment by the Prime Minister to make compromise. It's not just about getting the unions and the business in the same room. It's about actually making some big calls and having to actually make some genuine compromises and some commitments to actual reform. And so that's my big question around that. The second point I'd make on it is, while productivity is important, this is the gambit that he's making, the need to create jobs through improved productivity and agreements between unions and business. There are broader structural reforms, economic reforms that this country needs. We're in a transformative period in the global economy with the upheaval around COVID-19. There needs to be a look at big issues like manufacturing in Australia, like sovereign capability, like issues around reform for the economy with respect to full employment. All of these things need to be considered as well, and you can't just productivity is just one narrow part of that broader reform that's necessary to set us up for the 21st century in our economic recovery.
Well, what about business tax cuts?
Taxation reform, tax cuts.
Would you support that? I mean, business tax cuts across the board, would you support?
Well, we'd have to look at, that's a very broad thing. I supported tax cuts for working and middle-class Australians last year. I was on the record about that. And I thought we should have brought forward those tax cuts for working Australians. Whether it needs to be extended to businesses, at what level, there's potential reform around GST and tax cuts with respect to, tax reform with respect to even small businesses having to pay their GST every quarter. What about giving them some relief around cash flow? There's a lot of stuff there that can be looked at and that needs to be dealt with. And all I'm saying is I hope that it's not just spin over substance, that it's not another sort of marketing ploy, because this is going to be a big, big effort.
Well, you did mention that the Prime Minister should be making compromises. Compromises on what?
Well, when you get to a point where you've got business and unions in the room, everyone has different solutions about what they think needs to happen with respect to industrial relations. There's obviously not agreement, Pete. I think you'd understand that between elements of business and the union movement and even the government with respect to this. In fact, the government's been very ideological about this until this sort of about face or this pivot that we've just seen in the last 24 hours. So there's going to have to be some compromises made by all parties. That's what happened in the Accord back in the 80s. People had to work together. They had to engage, and the business community and unions had to come to certain agreements, make certain sacrifices. So that's going to apply to the government. Now, are they going to turn around their whole party room, which, by the way, for ideological reasons has killed reform on energy policy, for example? Are they going to be able to make those compromises with respect to moving forward? Even if you get agreement from the unions and business on a whole range of things in industrial relations around fixed employment and casuals and rights at work and all of these issues, is the government going to be able to actually move forward and get that through as well and make those calls and make those compromises, which is against its own ideological kind of history, if you like? Well,
what about a couple of other parts of the announcement that has been talked about a little bit, and I'll get your views on it. The increasing the education and skills around trades, that was talked about yesterday, but also the boost to housing construction. This was talked about yesterday afternoon too, where large grants can be given to buyers of new homes. I mean, does that have merit?
Yeah. Well, just to answer your question about the vocational skills training first, this is a government, when I talk about ideological positions, they have cut $3 billion from TAFE and training and skills. So they've been a real skills killer in many respects. 140,000 apprentices and trainees have gone under the current government. So I think that's what I'm talking about with making this big shift big ideological shift for this coalition government on something like this. So they're going to have to really change the way they do things and the way they see things. And we've been calling for more, support and funding for skills training and upskilling and apprentices for years. Obviously, as a Labor Party, that's what we do. On your question about the housing market, obviously, you noted some support for bolstering the housing sector. Obviously, there's going to be some uncharted territory that we're heading into with the economic slowdown and the high levels of unemployment. How that impacts the housing market is going to be, I think, significant. Not sure exactly how bad it's going to be, but I'm sure it will be a significant impact. So, of course, there needs to be policies around looking at how to make sure that the housing market doesn't collapse. There's a whole suite of economic reform and economic policy that needs to be looked at. And that's why the point I made earlier about this effort to try and improve productivity by getting unions and business and government under the same tent, great. But notwithstanding the ideological problems that I raised, but there are a whole range of other things that need to be dealt with structurally. And you mentioned some of them just then on vocational training and the housing market. So it can't just be about productivity.
So do you reckon September's too ambitious?
Well, it's a pretty short runway, isn't it, Pete? I mean, again, this is what makes me nervous. I want Australia to succeed, obviously. So, I'm trying to put aside our partisanship. We want the best for Australia. We want better rights and conditions and working conditions for working Australians. Absolutely. Are you going to be able to come to all those major decisions and come to agreement within 4 months? That is a really short runway. And that is another, I think, sort of red flag for me with respect to this. And that's why I'm trying to give the benefit of the doubt, but I'm questioning whether this is more Scotty from marketing doing a marketing ploy to look like, he's riding the crest of the wave of being the leader during an epidemic and having the national cabinet be quite successful, and sees the benefit in consensus politics, which we've been calling for a long time now, whether it's on energy policy or any of these things. We've been calling for him to come to the table. So is it a road to Damascus moment for the Prime Minister? Is he a true convert, Pete? Or is this just another marketing ploy?